Hi, Nora.
Hi, Andrew.
My guest today is Norah Shapiro, who is the filmmaker who made the film Time for Ilhan. So, Nora, thank you so much for joining me. My
Pleasure.
first question is, how did you enter into the world of Ilhan Omar?
Um, Kind of sideways. Um, I actually I had a different idea that was set in the Somali community in Minneapolis, where I live and where Ilhan is from. And I decided a good idea would be to run it by my Somali friend that I had known for many years and had seen previous films and liked my work and went over one afternoon for coffee and I sort of pitched her on my idea and I'm not going to take the time to go into
Right.
it. But suffice it to say, she said, great idea. Um, I'll just say quickly, it was about at that time the allegations of extremism by young Somali teenagers. Um, Living in Minnesota, we have the largest Somali population outside of Somalia, or at least we did
Right.
at that time. Um, and she said, great idea, but nobody will talk to you. I know you, I trust you, I love you. I wouldn't let you talk to my teenager. And I thought, oh. And then just as I was getting ready to leave, she said, you know what? You should have coffee with my sister. And she apparently told her sister the same thing, and coffee was had, and that was Ilhan and I meeting for the first time.
Oh,
I mean, I think at the end of the day, I don't think the film would ever have happened had there not been that trusted connection.
well, my next question to you was going to be, and you teed it up perfectly, was um, you gained access, incredible access, not only to Representative Omar, but to her family and her community during times that were certainly dramatic, momentous, sometimes tumultuous. What, what kind of advice do you have for
Yeah, that's
filmmakers
a really good
trying
question.
to, trying, obviously trying to gain trust?
Yeah. Um, so and it's happened other times for me as well with other projects, including my most recent film, where I would say there's a combination of connections or the most important thing I would say is being authentically who you are. Now, it's common sense. I would recommend, of course, not in a manipulative way, but figuring out. And of course, I would think this would drive what a filmmaker is going to be interested in anyway, because anyone who's a filmmaker knows how deep a dive it takes and what you're taking on when you actually go on the journey to make a feature length, much a feature length film in particular, series, what have you. But the biggest thing is about authenticity and about picking subjects, topics, people that do resonate. And I don't mean be able to fill out on, one of the Sundance funding grant applications, whatever the flavor of the time is. Those things come and go. I'm talking about really being in touch with why you want to make this film and why you should make the film. And I just think it grows out of that. It's authenticity. And then who you have connections to,
Well, then
how you
maybe
get to the person.
once you determine the subject, then it's a flow chart. You think, is there any way I can get to this person?
Maybe, I mean, I I have a something potentially in development right now, and it's probably the first time where I'm ever doing that, where it's flowing in that direction. The other times it really has come out of my being drawn to something and someone that is of deep meaning
Right.
to me, and then it literally it just grows out of that.
Well, your point about authenticity, I think, is a great one that goes in both ways because if you come in as your authentic self and your potential subject clearly doesn't dig you, then maybe you can schmooze the person to make him or her like you during that first meeting. But if you're really not on the same wavelength, then it's going to be a disaster at some point. So you might as well be yourself at the
100%.
beginning.
I mean, it's just sort of the way I run my life anyway. I'm just a very direct person. I just figure like put it out there, no subterfuge. But yeah, especially when you are following somebody where there is are going to be points of tension or conflict, um, you have to have trust.
And if you're not following somebody where there will be points of tension or
And it's
conflict,
not going to be
then it
interesting. So
won't
who
be a good
cares?
movie, right?
Right, right, right.
Um, the Another question I wanted to ask you was just stepping back a little bit. So you made this film in 2018, midway through Donald Trump's first presidency, and certainly at the time, and arguably still today, you were following a politician who had a rare combination in intersections of gender, race, immigration history. Um, and that resonated in a certain way in 2018. Do you think that resonates differently today?
Oh, I knew you were going to ask me that, and I was thinking about it, getting ready. So I was, I was just listening to the latest Ezra Klein podcast episode, and one of the things it was sort of like a soul searching of Democrats having to face like what happened, what do we, and they were laughing about like those of us that read the New York Times and all the other things have to realize that we're weird and that we really don't know. We're not like I mean, we don't exactly know what happened. Um, but I have to think that on a couple levels, three that initially spring to mind, it is especially still relevant, that this film. I mean, I hope it's evergreen, but one, I would say that Ilhan's that it's not even intersection of identities. It's whatever this combination, it's incredibly unlikely. Even if you were to Venn diagram those identities, she's got other things going on.
Of course.
Um, and it's part of what makes her such a remarkable politician. Now she has with certain people, a reputation of being a hothead and all kinds of other things and an extremist. Actually, what people don't often think about is she's the progressive whip. You don't get appointed that position if you can't get things done. She actually can work across the aisle. She's pragmatic, but she also stays very clear to her principles, which I think is extraordinarily important right now, especially in these last convulsions, and people will watch this and this will no longer be exactly now later. But also, the second thing I would say is, the film is about, and she is about, and offers hope for a certain kind of way of looking at the world and looking at democracy, looking at the promise of this country. And until that's dead and gone, God forbid that ever happens. I mean, I think I think we have to have hope, and I think we have to fight back. And if there's ever somebody to embody that, it's Ilhan, and she is the same fighter and person with much more experience and savvy now today that she was in the film.
Well,
And
yeah,
by the
I guess,
way, when the
yeah,
film was coming out, things were pretty as we were building to the finish, things were pretty bad. I mean, that was right when the Muslim ban, and in some ways, you just jump and fast forward. And she's just in a position of even more power, which thank goodness for
Yeah,
democracy.
I mean, the way you phrase the answer is helpful in thinking about what I meant by my question, which I think was in 2018, clearly the film was about presenting hope of this young, dynamic leader.
Hmm.
Do you think in 2025, her presence, character, identity, accomplishments, what some of her experience is inspires hope? Or do you think those who found that hopeful then are now looking for something else to find hopeful? To the extent that that vision isn't where we are today.
I don't know. I go back to like that actually she's really a pragmatic politician. And so here's let me just say this. Like I don't know if I can entirely answer that.
Right.
If I had a crystal ball,
Oh, yeah.
I'd, be making a lot more money. But what I will say
You'd be at the
is
racetrack.
that somebody interviewed me. Somebody did an interview and it did a review of the film or something. And in a different way was kind of getting at the same thing back then. And it was why would people who aren't Democrats like this film or care about this? And what I said to him, you know, perhaps in different words, was essentially the film and Ilhan's story and pathway is about the American dream. Like it's not about a Democratic or Republican. I mean, I think like that is actually one of the most evergreen things for somebody walking in and watching it new. It's this romance about what American democracy is
Totally agree.
capable of. And so I mean, don't get me wrong, like we're in some really bleak, dark times. If you are a Democrat, much less a progressive Democrat, which I mean, I am. Um, but times change and things swing and yeah, I think she still offers hope. And she is somebody who, you know, documentaries about politics go in and out of vogue also, as we know, as you know. In fact, you'd be better to, I'll ask you about that. I'll turn the questions around. But I don't think we're ever gonna, we may be in a lull right now, but I still think there are amazing opportunities for looking at all kinds of other things that are happening in culture and society. So that's my long-winded answer.
No, that's a good answer. So tell me what questions you have for me.
Well, I was going to ask you, so when will political films, um, when's the pendulum going to swing? And when are films that aren't celebrity or true crime films going to be when is there going to be a market? Or what has to change in the market? Because you're out there fighting the fights and
Um, my
it's
crystal
bleak.
ball has not been working for 63 years, unfortunately. So that's I can't answer with total reliability. Um, I would say to you in no particular order, I think the true crime fascination has dwindled.
Good,
Um,
because I don't think it's good for society,
um,
but
I mean, I think, the interest in that has become almost even more base, so that people just want to see cameras of crimes being committed or people
ugh,
being arrested. I mean, so it's not even a who done it and
right.
suspense, it's just getting to the brutality.
Mm,
Um,
terrible.
it's pretty tough going.
Yeah.
Although this wasn't your question, I will say, just because it occurred to me, I thought the fact that the Nickel Boys, did you see that film? Did
I
not.
read the book and
Okay.
I haven't finished it,
Okay.
but
I read the book and I saw the movie, and the fact that that film did not get an R rating is unbelievable
it
to me.
is unbelievable.
It is so, I mean, yes, the violence happens. little bit off screen, but it is so violent and so
Psychologically, it is so disturbing.
it
Yeah.
is so disturbing and so horrible. The
Yes.
idea that a curse word would cause a 13-year-old not to be able to go into the movie theater, but a, a child would be allowed to sit through such human brutality is
Yes.
grotesque. Okay, I diverge. In terms of political films, I mean, there are, as you probably know, there are a lot of political films that are being made. I mean, leading up to this election, there were a lot of political films being made. Were they being sold? No. Did some find their audiences? Yes. We had a film that was released about 8 months ago, maybe, yeah, June, called Bad Faith about
Mm,
Christian nationalism. And I first tried to sell it to all the usual suspects.
yeah.
And understandably, companies that are owned by bigger companies don't want to have a political film that's on one side of the aisle or the
Yeah.
other.
Yeah.
So and that's not surprising, but even more niche operations who have the same political views as those expressed in the film just didn't want it. However, we distributed it and had scores of public screenings where people paid a lot of money
Wow.
and put it up on various transactional and subscription VOD and ad-supported VOD sites, and the filmmakers made a lot of money.
Well, that's
So
encouraging.
I think I think I don't know how things will look in 5 years, but I think in the very near future, um, knowing who your audience is key in
Yeah.
the marketing. Saying, "Oh, I think my film is for everyone." I mean, like, Time for Ilhan. You could say, yes, it's about the American dream, and isn't that something everyone strives for, believes in, wants to believe in? But if your film is for everyone, that you can't reach everyone.
Right.
So let's narrow it down. Who do you think will really respond to your film? Who will, from your elevator pitch, be interested? And once you've discerned that, target your message about the film to that group. And if they like it, they'll have friends who have different interests. Not everyone is a fisherman, not everyone is a dentist, or whatever the topic of an actor, whatever the topic of the film is. Um, but they'll have friends who have different interests. And if the film is powerful, then other people will want to see it because they heard good word. Um, but I think it's really about starting off with a very narrow focus of who you really have reason to believe will be a fan of the movie.
True.
I thank you very much for your afternoon, taking your time this afternoon. And what you want to just say a word about your upcoming movie?
Sure. My up about to launch film is called Magic and Monsters, and it could be coming out in the world in a better time, but I still think this is going to be one of those films that does find its way and through a lot of the sort of strategy that you outlined. But it's a story about um, certainly America's, if not the world's most preeminent children's theater that happens to be based to this day in also here in Minneapolis, home of Ilhan Omar in her congressional district.
And
Um,
Norah Shapiro.
but it was it was started in the basement of some crappy little room near the college campus, nothing, and it rose literally within a handful of years to be on the cover of Smithsonian Magazine. D.A. Pennebaker did a film that no one's ever seen about it because this artistic director was so remarkable. Ended up multi-million dollar star architect, gorgeous campus, and tentacles into theater and beyond, TV, film, everywhere. Also happened to be a pedophile. And the what happened there to many, many, many children over the course of many, many years, and as it turns out, not only by this artistic director, but other adults, was buried effectively for
By
decades
the artistic director and other adults he
on
hired.
staff in the theater. And then so that's bad enough and interesting enough, but fast forward to the 20 teens, just at the tip of the be, earliest of Me Too's or just before Me Too days, Minnesota was one of the first states to do a statute of limitations reform, the same kind of thing that allowed Trump to be sued and found guilty, for example. And it was designed for the Catholic Church victims and Boy Scout victims, but it just so happened that it bubbled up at the same time as the 50th anniversary, star-studded 50th anniversary of this theater, reunions, alumni get-togethers, and fast forward a Facebook alumni group, the water broke, the dam burst, and all of a sudden
Oh,
staggering revelations, staggering numbers that led to what turned out to be a group of 17 former students out of many, many, many more that were affected, suing the theater and or their abusers. So the point that I came in was just after the first one had gone to trial. And there were 16 more pending. And the film is through the lens of the litigation and both goes backward in time through an extraordinarily rich archival treasure chest, including D.A. Pennebaker
right.
material, film, never before seen film, and forward following the plaintiff survivors as they tried to get through and then after litigation with still needing healing and so it's a story of a dark subject, but it's also ultimately it's a look at institutional courage or lack thereof and asks questions about when an institution is faced with wrongdoing from its past. How could it respond?
That's a big topic.
And it's about when survivors do have the support and the temerity to come together and actually push for their truth to be heard, how healing that can be. So ultimately, it's a really, I think, a positive film, heavy subject, not for everybody, but it's a really, I think, and especially now, I think it's a really important film.
And where are you premiering?
We're premiering at the Minneapolis St. Paul International Film Festival because even though that's not a big thing necessarily out of this community, um, on in terms of industry, it's extraordinarily important
Well,
for
it
this
sounds
community
right.
and these people whose lives were so affected. And we're just going to build from there. So we'll see what happens with our festival run. And then we've got a very um, ambitious and exciting, I would say, impact campaign. I've done a lot of what you've already described in terms of knowing who our audience is and um, partnering with some amazing national organizations that have lots and lots of um, people who will be interested and for whom I hope the film will be able to be a tool in their toolkit in fighting child sexual abuse, which is an epidemic, as anybody who reads the paper
Right. I was going
knows.
to say, sadly, it's pretty easy to identify one large audience for this story. Well, I wish you the best of luck in
Thank
bringing
you.
it to as many people as possible.
Thank you.
We'll be in
Appreciate it.
touch. Bye,
Thanks
Norah.
a
Thank
lot. Good to
you.
see you.
Bye.
Bye. Take care.